The main problem, as always, with the oil industry and the gas as well, is to understand how the industry operates in economic terms. What are the forces driving the price of oil, the price of gas? What drives the demand for energy, the supplies, etc. This is the perennial problem we have in our business. People have tried over many years to understand it, but the main issue is that it's an industry that is driven by geopolitical events, by government policy, by interference with the free markets throughout the world, because energy is considered a very important part of life, and anything that's valuable and important comes under the influence of many forces, also political. And when this happens, there are factors that are uncontrollable and unforeseeable, and this is the problem in our business, how to try to understand an industry that is subject to so many uncertainties. Many attempts have been made and progress has been made, but it still remains very difficult to understand what drives oil prices and what drives demand, supply. Mainly prices is the difficulty. For many years now, I would say even decades, I have been trying, either alone or with associates, to produce a model that tries to explain what drives the oil market. I started this work many years ago in BP when I was with the company, and we were quite successful in creating a dynamic model of the oil market. But this was before the 1986 crash in oil prices, which the model didn't predict, because there was a structural change in the industry in 1985, and the model did not take into account this change because no one expected it. And this is an example of what I said earlier, that you might get a good idea of how something works, but because the industry is subject to these sudden changes, we were not able to predict the crash in oil prices, and that was a lesson for me, a salutary lesson that it's a very difficult subject. But I have persisted over the years, and in the last, I'd say maybe 3-4 years, with my colleague and collaborator Dr. Clifford Weimer, who was here, I think, last year, we have been working on this dynamic model in continuous time, which tries to determine not just the price of oil, but the futures price of oil, demand for oil, supply, OPEC production, non-OPEC production, stocks, etc. So we try to determine many variables at the same time. So it's a simultaneous determination of these variables, and we hope that from that we can predict then the price of oil, the futures price of oil, and all these other variables. We have made quite a bit of progress, but in terms of forecasting ability, I'm afraid to say, and I will say it in my presentation, that it's very difficult to beat what is known as the naive forecast, which is the no change forecast, which the model doesn't do. Mind you, no one else achieves this either. I'm going to present results from analysis of the consensus forecasts, many people together, and even the consensus forecast is not very accurate. In fact, it's worse than the model. So we're really, as they say, up against the problem of beating the naive or no change forecast. the no change forecast says that the price next month, tomorrow, or whatever time unit you prefer, it will be the same as last time. So to beat that is actually very difficult, consistently. And that's the problem that everyone has. Now the question arises, and I will talk about it in the presentation, whether this means that it's not worth doing any research. Because I also said that the world, the oil business is subject to many uncertainties, geopolitical, etc. So the question is, if you can't foresee these events, you cannot predict the price, therefore why bother? But I think we can learn from trying to understand how the system works, even if we cannot forecast accurately.